Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Glenn Howard. I'm the president of the Jamestown Foundation. We're delighted that each and one of you are here today to our discussion on Balkan energy battlegrounds, gas pipelines, and geopolitics. It's again an effort, part of the Jamestown Foundation, to continue to draw attention to the importance of energy geopolitics in Europe and Eastern Europe. And today we're focusing a little bit on the Black Sea and the Balkans. Certainly the Balkans is now at a strategic energy junction. We've seen all eyes have been focused in Washington and Capitol Hill on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline project, and we've, to great detriment, have been ignoring the Black Sea region and the recent development of the TurkStream pipeline coming online and how important that has been in December. And so what we're trying to do today is trying to talk about the strategic importance as a backdoor of Europe in the Balkans and why this is important. Certainly, sanctions have worked in blocking Nord Stream 2, and despite this, the Russian pipeline ship, if you're not following the news, the Cherkasy is making its way back to the Baltic under the ostensible purpose of laying pipeline and continuing the efforts to complete Nord Stream 2. But unfortunately, what is blocking it now are not sanctions, but also the cod are apparently in the Baltic are now in mating season in May, and that will be blocking its efforts for the foreseeable future, I am told. So this is very important as we kind of now focus and turn our attention to the Balkans. Our first panel will be exploring the Balkan energy dimension and explain why we're at an energy crossroads and how Russian pipeline projects are affecting the Balkans and global gas markets. We also have a discussion that will be part of the panel. We'll be talking about the strategic initiative of the 3 Cs initiative and how it's emerging as a key issue that certainly warrants further watching. Our second panel will explore the Southern Gas Corridor and the role of TurkStream and LNG and examine the competitive dimensions of this rivalry. We're also delighted in the second panel to have Rob Scher from BP, who will be speaking about the Southern Gas Corridor and how it affects EU energy security. We're also, on the second panel, delighted to have that Ben Schmitz, former U.S. State Department, is joining us to offer his perspective, fresh from his travels to the Antarctica. But he'll be back covering Ukraine and discussing this, while Rauf Mamyedov will be discussing the prospects for energy supplies to the Balkans, and a panel that will be moderated by former U.S. Ambassador to Azerbaijan, Robert Chikuta. I'm delighted to turn the floor over now to our moderator and presenter, Margarita Assenova, who is a senior fellow at the Jamestown Foundation. Margarita.
Thank you, Glenn, and welcome everyone. I'm glad to see so many people today in this rainy afternoon in Washington, D.C. Let's start with looking at the maps of Russian gas supply at the moment. This is where the pipelines are going through, and I'm sure that everyone has seen those maps, but sometimes we don't remember everything. So seeing how most of the gas supply lines to Europe are going through Ukraine is an important reminder of what is going to happen and what the impact is going to be on Ukraine if Nord Stream 2 is completed and TurkStream 2 acquires infrastructure to transmit Russian gas from the Black Sea to all the way to Baumgarten in Austria. This is what Nord Stream 2 looks like, and as Glenn said, while we are watching Nord Stream 2 and when the sanctions are going to come into effect and whether the Treasury Department is going to approve everything that Congress has voted, we missed what was happening with TurkStream 2. Why did we miss it? Because it was built in record time. It was built in 2.5 years. It started in May 17 and was completed by November 2019. So by the time the sanctions came into effect in December last year, TurkStream 2 was completed. And why is that important? Because the sanctions are concerning only certain vessels that are laying the pipelines in deep waters. Not everybody involved in the Russian pipelines is subjected to sanctions. Only the vessels, these are very few companies in the world that are specialized to do that. It's a specific technology. It's also specific vessels that are required by the countries in the regions where they lay pipelines So Allseas, the Swiss-based company, stopped building Nord Stream immediately in December as soon as the sanctions were announced and the bill was signed by the president. But the vessels had completed their work in the Black Sea already. And why is it important that these sanctions stay in place and they're not removed? Because I believe that Russia is not going to limit itself with TurkStream 1 and 2 only. I think that if the experiment is successful, they are going to go and proceed with a couple more strings to divert the entire volumes of gas that is going currently through Ukraine to other routes. And Mikhail Korchemkin is going to talk about this in more detail, but this is how it looks now. The blue line is TurkStream 1 and TurkStream 2, two strings, each of them for 15.75 BCM of gas. TurkStream, Europe needs gas and Russia has it. Well, that's a title from Euronews, a respectable publication, and actually the article was pretty good. The title, though, is wrong. Europe, in fact, is buying less gas from Russia now than before. There was a drop in Russian gas supplies to Europe last year, and although Gazprom registered 199 BCM, just a little bit lower than the previous year, sources in Moscow, Russian press, is reporting that 15% of this gas, about 30 BCM, was actually bought by Gazprom Bank or other conduits that stored it in Europe, and it wasn't actually sold to end users. It was just stored in Europe. This is why the storages in Europe were up to 97% full last September, which is a record in the last 8 years. So 37% down for the 3 quarters of last year were Russian sales to Europe, and then we have to look at the profits. 45% lower year-on-year decline in net profits for Gazprom in the 3rd quarter of 2019. This is, Europe paid less for gas because gas is cheaper now. And why is gas cheaper now in Europe? Because of the abundance of LNG supplies that have increased by 75% in the 3rd quarter of last year. And let's look at the Russian supplies. As I mentioned, 199. This is, by the way, Russian billion cubic meters. If we're going to transfer them into European billion cubic meters, we have to reduce by almost 8%. Just the way of pressure and temperature works in Russian measurements and our measurements. So this is going to be about 178, possibly, that this has gone to Europe and Turkey, European Union and Turkey, and other countries that are not in the European Union in Europe. And if we look at Turkey and what is happening there, Gazprom is actually losing its market share in Turkey as well. Turkey is, there is lower consumption, there is a very significant market diversification. Turkey has managed to diversify its sources of supply by increasing the supplies from Azerbaijan through the Southern Gas Corridor, by increasing the supplies of LNG and building new terminals. So Turkey is no longer the 2nd largest market for Gazprom in Europe. After Germany, it's Italy, and Turkey comes 3rd. Turkey is now the 2nd European largest LNG importer, and that's an important thing to note, because this is going to have impact in the entire region, not only on Turkey. Here is how Mikhail Korchemkin put together this data. At some point, Russia's gas supplies to Turkey are minus 38%. Azerbaijani gas supplies are up 29%. Iran a little change, and LNG up by 20%. This is how it looks compared to 2018. You can see the drop in Russian gas supplies. So why is this, and let's talk a little bit about the prices, because that's important too. This is a map from 2013. RFERL prepared this beautiful map. It's interactive, and you can find it on their website, and it can tell you exactly what the price of in each country is. And you can see all these red countries that have been paying over $475 per 1,000 cubic meters of gas. Among them, Ukraine, Poland, but you can also see Bulgaria, Macedonia, and Greece. So these were the most expensive markets, the most lucrative markets for Gazprom, although they're very small markets. And then you can see that Turkey was paying also above $400 per 1,000 cubic meters. And let's see what happened with the prices now. These are the spot prices at the moment. This, as early as this morning. The spot price has dropped down to 3.6. And this is, the measurement is different here, is per million BTU. But important number to remember, under $4. Last year, in 2018, for example, around October, November, the price was $8.8. Now it's 3.6. Why is that? One, the warm weather in Europe, the warm weather in Asia allowed a lot of LNG supplies to divert from Asian market to the European market. And once the supplies are available in such volumes, of course, the price goes down. What happens when the price of LNG goes down? The spot markets go down. See what happens with the contract market. These are the gas contract prices in the white, in the blue. In the blue are the Russian contract prices. In the white is European spot prices. So Russian gas prices, even in the contracts, are following the European spot prices, and they're going down as well. This is why the profits of Gazprom are dropping by almost 50%. This is how TurkStream looks like. Look at the gray line there. That was the prospective South Stream pipeline that failed. It failed because Gazprom refused to comply with European regulations. It didn't fail because the Bulgarian government suspended the project. The project has to be suspended if Bulgaria wanted to be member of the European Union and of the Energy Union as well. When the project was suspended for Russia to comply with European regulations, they decided to cancel it in December and instead build the red line, which is South Stream Light, we call it, to Turkey, but not to the eastern part, but to the western part of Turkey. From the western part of Turkey, there is a very little space here to the Bulgarian border, and it was very easy to build a compression station and an interconnector, which was built in record times as well, this time not by Gazprom, but by Bulgargas, the Bulgarian gas company, because they really, really wanted this gas to come through Bulgaria and be transited further to Central Eastern Europe. And here we're talking about the Balkan Gas Hub. The Balkan Gas Hub looks like a very useful infrastructure that would allow gas to come from different sources and to be sold to traders in Bulgaria, serve as a trading platform, and from there it can be resold to other places. Problem is, and Misha is going to tell you this in a moment, how these capacities are already booked by Gazprom companies. So it means that the capacity that is coming from Turkey here, this is going to use the Trans-Balkan pipeline in the reverse. It means Ukrainian gas from Ukraine is no longer coming to the Balkans. It's connecting to another new pipeline, brand new pipeline, this yellow, orange one, that is going from Bulgaria to Serbia. From Serbia, it's going to be further connected to Hungary and up to Austria and Baumgarten. So, who is building this pipeline? Presumably the Bulgarian government. The money should be paid by the Bulgarian government. It's built by a Saudi Arabia company, it's reported that it has connections to Russian energy circles. And the other information that is coming through the vine is that it's actually Russian money that is funding at the moment this project. But the project is already included in the list of priority projects of the European Union. That means that once in March the European Parliament votes that list, if it's approved, the Commission already, the relevant Commission has already approved that list, the Bulgarian Gas Hub is going to be allowed to receive public funding from the European Union, which in fact, in practice means that the European Union is going to be funding a Russian geopolitical project, geostrategic project of diverting gas transit from Ukraine, pushing it through the Balkans in order to submit Ukraine and in order to keep the Balkans also under political and economic influence. Is this going to happen? Probably it's going to happen if the European Union is not smart enough to put conditions and not allow this new gas pipeline to be used more than 50% for Russian gas, as is per the gas directive. The gas directive requires exactly that, 50% to one supplier and the rest to alternative suppliers such as Southern Gas Corridor and LNG. And you can see here this, I believe, last graph that I put here. You can see exactly where the quantities are going to come from. 17.93 is coming from Russia. Only 1 BCM here local gas production, and about 3 here from the Bulgaria-Greece interconnector, which is going to be Azeri gas. The European Commission specifically requested from Bulgaria that gas from 3 sources is secured before they approve the project. On paper, yes, this is gas from 3 sources. Is it proportionate? Is it comparable? No. The conditions should be 3 volumes, comparable volumes from 3 different sources in order for this gas hub to work as a trade platform fully and properly, and not just collect transit fees for transiting Russian gas to Central and Eastern Europe. Okay, I will stop here. This is going to be one option in the future, maybe, to get Azeri gas all the way to Ukraine through the now reversed Trans-Balkan pipeline. But we will discuss this further later. And now I'll stop here and give the microphone to Mikhail Korchemkin. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Margarita.
He's an energy expert with vast experience in energy and Russian energy projects. He's been teaching at University of Pennsylvania, and he's a consultant to Free Russia Foundation at the moment.
TurkStream was built really fast, so I didn't have time to get myself a T-shirt about TurkStream. I used the old one, just about Nord Stream. Anyway, the TurkStream is a part of big plan of Gazprom, which is to bypass Ukraine and divert gas flows to the Baltic Sea and to the Black Sea from both sides. And to do that, Gazprom and its partners built already 90 billion cubic meters a year of capacity at the border of Germany and Czech Republic, and more than 31 BCM at the Turkish shore. This is more than Gazprom shipped through Ukraine last year. It was about 19. The whole plan costs more than $100 billion. And I think this was the main reason for launching it. Putin wanted Gazprom contractors to have a nice piece of this $100 billion, which they did, and his close friend became multi-billionaires, the richest people, among the richest people of Russia. So this is a reminder that The plan, the big plan of Gazprom is combined with the so-called optimization program that was about physical liquidation of pipelines that are delivering gas from West Siberia and elsewhere to the Ukrainian border. So Gazprom officially declared that it would reduce the capacity, the transit capacity of Ukraine from the current 140 billion cubic meters a year to 10 billion. And remarkably, this program was sold under the flag of Europe needs more Russian gas. At the first stage, TurkStream was meant to replace the Trans-Balkan gas pipeline. Actually, this pipeline is one of probably the only project that Gazprom worked on in this century, in this millennium, and expanded it by about 4 billion cubic meters in 2003, jointly with Naftogaz and some other companies. So this pipeline, as you can see, used to supply gas to Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, Greece, and North Macedonia. It's indicative to look at the actual daily gas flow at the inlet of Trans-Balkan pipeline. You can see that it drastically declined in 2019. Compared to the capacity of even one line of TurkStream, it's insignificant. So if Gazprom wants to load both lines of TurkStream, it would need to triple the volume of gas. Looking at the markets supplied by TurkStream, first of all of them are declining. And first of all, it's Turkey, which is using much less gas for power generation in the first place. And this is due to the commissioning of a major hydropower plant over a year ago. And Russia is also working on the construction of Akuyu nuclear power plant, which will eventually cut another piece from the gas use in the power market. And Turkey now imports more gas from Azerbaijan and LNG from many sources. It's very important that, as Margarita just mentioned, the gas-to-gas competition finally made it to the Balkans. There are many sources the Balkan countries can get gas from. These are several LNG terminals in Turkey, in Greece, coming terminal in Croatia, plus the new TANAP pipeline, and maybe some Mediterranean gas later on. So it's very unlikely that Gazprom would increase gas sales in this area. It is already declining, and this is just the initial stage of competition. Not mentioning the competition with other sources, clean sources like hydro energy in Turkey. Gazprom believes that additional markets would come with the expansion of new links. This is a map from Russian Kommersant newspaper. Gazprom's plan to build pipeline sections from Turkey through Bulgaria, Serbia, to Hungary and Slovakia. But this would take TurkStream gas to the markets that are to be supplied by Nord Stream 2. So technically, Gazprom foresees the competition of TurkStream gas with the gas from Nord Stream 2. There is excessive capacity already built that enters Czech Republic and Slovakia from the north. And there are no new markets in the area, no new consumption. The overall gas consumption is not to grow any fast, and especially considering the availability of other gas in Europe, prospects of Gazprom are not good. Another concern is that about the exemption from third energy package. By the European law, exemptions should not affect the performance of existing transit operators, such as, for instance, Bulgar Transgas and specifically the Romanian Transgas company. And in this case, it will affect, because Romania has lost everything already, physical volumes, but not the revenue yet. Yeah, it's interesting. Somehow it's not, anyway. It's about the TurkStream Propaganda. If you compare it with the propaganda around Nord Stream 2, you see that TurkStream business was very weak. And in fact, the public support of TurkStream was not needed in that part of the world. Simply, everything was achieved by bilateral talks of Putin with Erdogan and leaders of Bulgaria and Hungary. So public opinion just matters much less than the one in Northern Europe and northern members of the European Union. Gazprom did not use disinformation and lies about TurkStream selling additional gas as they did with Nord Stream 2. They simply said it straightforward that this is about bypassing Ukraine, nothing else. And neither it was, TurkStream was called the shortest or the cheapest route, which obviously would be very difficult to prove, impossible rather. Gazprom just said that this option to ship Siberian gas to Austria through the Black Sea is the best one. And indeed, it is the best for the contractors of Gazprom, no doubt about that. Officially, the pipelines built in the developed plains of southern Russia, where they have a lot of existing right-of-ways for pipelines, railroads, roads, electricity power lines, was 3 times more expensive per kilometer than at identical projects in Germany and Czech Republic. So Gazprom very generously paid its contractors. And moreover, after the completion of all projects inside Russia, including Power of Siberia, the feeding pipelines of Nord Stream and TurkStream, Gazprom bought out the construction business from Mr. Rothenberg at a very good price, like several times higher than they sold it to him. And Putin never, initially he did hide the fact of these were his friends, but at some point he started to recognize it and finally even became proud of having such good friends. So about the economic effect of TurkStream, in the midterms, there is no one in Europe. Transit incomes, revenues of Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria are protected by ship-or-pay contracts. The only party that lost because of the project is Gazprom itself, because on top of the existing costs, they have additional ship-or-pay transit costs in Turkey and huge depreciation costs in the Russian section of its pipeline system. But there is a major concern I want to end my presentation with. This is the role of bypassing pipelines, or pipelines bypassing Ukraine. Back in 2007, Gazprom built what then looked unnecessary bypassing project to make it possible to supply southern Russian regions of Rostov, on-Don, and other without getting into Ukraine. And Gazprom claimed that they did it to save about $40 million a year of transit fees they were paying on that tiny section. With the multi-billion pipeline and compressor station, the operating expenses were much higher than 40 million a year. So at that point, it didn't make any sense. But after several years, Russia invaded that area of Ukraine. And by a coincidence, no combat activities involving artillery and even small arms never took place near the operating pipelines. Everything was happening in the area of abandoned pipelines. So it's just maybe that without this bypassing pipeline, the war might never have happened at all. So in general, any pipeline bypassing Ukraine means a higher risk of war. Thank you.
Such a great presentation. And now we're going to turn to Ambassador Réka Szemerkényi, who is the Vice President of the Center for European Policy Studies here, European Policy Center in Washington. She's going to talk about the 3Cs initiative, the initiative by several European countries to combine their efforts and connect the eastern part of the continent from north to south, as opposed to what is now from east to west or west to east, so that they can increase their energy security both in the gas sector and the electricity sector. Réka, what is going to be the impact of TurkStream and the other energy sources that are coming to the Balkans on the 3Cs initiative?
Thank you very much, Margarita, and thank you, Jamestown Foundation, for organizing this event. I think it's a very timely and a very important moment to touch base on what is happening in particular in the Balkans, in the energy security side. The attention to the importance of this region, I think, was largely underlined by the recent Munich Security Conference announcement of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who announced the U.S.'s support for a European concern. That was a very important message for all of Europeans and primarily for the 3Cs initiative countries, because it came after a period of a good 2 years of statements and political preparatory work at the 3Cs initiative framework, in which we could see that there were an increasing number of political leaders who were supporting the 3Cs initiative, who were talking about it verbally. There was an increasing amount of understanding of the strategic importance of the various fields of cooperation within this 3Cs initiative countries, but it was still an initiative. There were still very few projects, and there was absolutely very little money contributed to it. So the 3Cs initiative itself came to a moment of being at the crossroads, of seeing whether this initiative is going to become one of those grandiose ideas that sort of vanish in history because nothing happens of them, or actually it will be able to give a big push to the strategic infrastructure investment projects that make the concepts a reality. This was the moment when we saw the support of the American foreign policy, what is towards a region, especially, I think, the countries of the 3Cs initiative, that is not very obviously in the focus of strategic concerns. When we see, with special regards, of course, the Southeast European countries, when we see these countries' role in energy security, even in the Central East European region, we can see that their role is fundamentally, truly peripheral. The broader region combined, even, the total demand is only about 33 BCM per year. The gas demand of several countries are practically zero, non-existent. Montenegro is zero. Republic of North Macedonia, 0.2. Bosnia-Herzegovina, 0.4. Kosovo, 0. Albania, 0. Slovenia, 0.9. Serbia, 3.5. And then Bulgaria 4, Greece 3.8, Croatia 2.6, and their largest consumer is Romania with an annual 17 BCM. Even together, of course, this would not necessarily explain, a strong concern. But as we know very well, there are two reasons to make a region strategically important in the world of energy security. Either its consumption and market size, or its geostrategic location for transit. And what we can see in the case of the Southeast European countries, it is location, transit, and the strategic vulnerability that makes it of particularly important for us to understand and to focus on this region. Especially, when we come to this Balkans area. It's very customary, I hear it oftentimes in Washington, that it is really Europe that should be primarily supporting the political stabilization and the economic reintegration of this part of the European continent, the Balkans. If not for an altruistic, value-based democracy and free market agenda, then for their own interest of stability and security. That is a common American vision of the region. Stabilization and integration are the leitmotifs of this American vision of the Balkans. But for Washington, stabilization of the Balkans and the integration of these countries into the European continent are not only no-brainers, if I may say, but these are also goals that can be achieved at a relatively reasonable effort and cost. The success of the Dayton Agreement showed that an intensive diplomatic commitment can bear long-lasting fruit. The NATO integration of the region showed that engagement can be strategically successful. The problems of the region are very complex and have very deep historic roots, which scare most Americans away. But there is a feeling, rightly or wrongly, that through active commitment, these problems can be solved, and through an inactive presence, they can be at least kept at an acceptably low level. That's the American vision of the Balkans. But I say there are at least 4 other visions that are competing about the Balkans areas, which I think are driving the fate and the history of this area. Another vision about the Balkans is formulated by the Central Europeans, I think, because they are the ones who have the Balkans on their radar. For most of them, it has become increasingly clear that whatever happens in the Balkans will spill over and hit them directly. In their vision, the Balkans is now a key periphery of the continent and an integral part of the future of the European continent. So cooperation, stability, integration, these are the driving elements of their vision. These are the founding principles that are behind the 3 Seas Initiative concept. So this is sort of the political name of their vision. However, for the rest of Europe, the Balkans is very far from that. For the rest of Europe, the Balkans is the backyard, and that's a problematic one. Seen from Paris, Brussels, and most of the European Union capitals, the inclusion of this region into the European institutions is more likely to cause headaches than solve problems. From this perspective, negging the integration process of these countries is not surprising, nor a wrong strategic approach. From this perspective, this is the right thing to do. So for them, the vision about the Balkans is a very troublesome one. But this is the 3rd vision about the Balkans. There's a 4th one. What is an unattractive backyard for one is a very convenient loading deck for another. This is China's vision of the Balkans. It's a great logistical base, a key entry point towards the EU countries' markets, where investing in transport and infrastructure has a long-term strategic benefit, hence Beijing's 16+1 strategy of sweeping aside the currently existing institutional frameworks of NATO and EU membership in which these countries operate, and they launch a completely different dialogue, which is defined by Beijing's interest alone. Keeping the best loading deck and developing infrastructure from there makes perfect sense. It also makes sense that serious investment in this infrastructure can only start on the basis of sufficient confidence of long-term stability. This is the Chinese strategy about the Balkans. And yet, from yet another point of view, what is a problematic backyard for the Europeans, and what is a convenient loading deck for another outside power? The Balkans is the key base of operations for another actor. In Russia's vision, historic relations may help it, like with Serbia, or leave it neutral. But the fact is that there is no real strong anti-Russian sentiments in any of these countries. of the region, practically, and that this part of Europe is very conveniently fragmented and divided among ethnic and nationality lines, religious lines, politically separated. Not many of them are integrated into the European Union or NATO, yet is strategically located. So this is a fantastic base for operation and a platform for continental influence. Obviously, for Moscow, the vision about the Balkans is a strategic one. It's not just to exploit the weaknesses, it's to build from this a very powerful and proactive presence in the rest of the European continent. What we could see is also that a decline in the economic presence of the European Union, a decline of the strategic presence of the United States, is further opening the possibilities for a strategic basing in this area. But out of these widely diverging strategic visions, the Balkans is in a fundamentally imbalanced and asymmetric situation in which these international actors that are active in the region have no benign interest in the genuine development of the region, and those that would have an interest in the real social and economic development of the region are not sufficiently active there. No better example of this asymmetric position than the situation of the energy sector in the region. What we can see through the energy sector developments is a series of steps that I think are almost as sort of classical sort of handbook practices that are operated. There's a continuous overcharge of the energy prices provided for this region. However small the markets are, the operation of these markets is very far from the operation of a market economy. There is a strong possibility and a strong use of earning monopoly rents there. There is a history of successful frustration of the diversification of energy supplies and of the liberalization of the energy markets in these countries. And what are the Russian tools for this? There is a whole range of very handful tools to achieve these successes, quote unquote. There is a whole list of structural market deficits in the country's energy markets, which can be easily exploited. There is a lack of independent regulators in many of the countries, or if there is some kind of an independence, there is a strong imbalance in the operation of the regulators. The management of state-owned companies and enterprises is also lacking the best practices, to say the least. Availability of local brokers to provide an extra access to political and governmental decisions is also there, making it very easy. So what we can see is that as a result of these tools, the goals of drawing these countries into massive energy infrastructure projects, which are probably not in the interest of the region itself, not in the interest of any of the individual countries itself, is far easier than in many other parts of the European continent. So what we can see is that this framework that we have launched 2 years ago in Central Europe, or that these countries have launched, the 3Cs initiative, is trying to reach out to these countries and trying to provide the necessary strategic framework, which is broader than the region, because of obviously their internal, regional, ethnic, and historic conflicts. No simply regional solution has been working. I have been working on these regional cooperations over the last 20 years. Most of them were frustrated because of the internal tensions of the region itself. A slightly larger framework is needed to be able to make a strategic step forward, but not as large as the European Union, because then again, we have an additional problem. But the 3Cs initiative approach is providing the proper strategic environment for going forward and to allow this region to have these 3 big power centers of gas supplies, which we are trying to link in the 3Cs, which the 3Cs initiative project is trying to link together. These 3 big power centers of potential gas supplies is, of course, one in the Baltic, one in the Black Sea area, and one in the Adriatic Sea, hence the name of the initiative. So what we have seen is a very important moment for this approach, both for the Southeast European countries' development as well as for the Central East European larger regions' energy security. One is the coming back big time of U.S. interest and U.S. presence in the region. It is a very important and very powerful political message that has to be repeated and has to be understood. A second, however, equally important key development that defines the region's stability and future potential is another announcement. If you recall Secretary Pompeo's announcement on February 15th, I think on February 13th, there was another statement announced by Vitaly Baryabalov, the Deputy Vice President of SOCAR, who announced that the Southern Gas Corridor, SGC, was almost ready and that it would be fully operational by the end of 2020. Having access to the broader region, for the broader region, to the Azeri gas is a long-held dream that has been on the under the surface for a long time. So that brings me very quickly to see what are the most recent developments in the energy projects in the region. What we can see is that already at this stage of sort of the pause on and hopefully halting of the Nord Stream 2 construction, the impact on the region is visible. Gas flows are currently going through a major changes in the Central East European region as a result of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, with direct spillover effects to the Southeast European part of the continent as well. The traditional direction of flows will change from east to west to the other way around or from north to south. There is a lot of reconsideration and a lot of rethinking of the applicability of the currently existing infrastructure. But we can see that very clearly this will completely redraw the current gas map of the region, and the cost of these changes is going to be huge. TurkStream. The Russian gas's entrance into the region has been really at an initial phase. Small volumes arrive into the region. However, the route that previously was used has been dried already since January 1st, 2020. As the Turkish Stream 1 and 2 are already operational, Russia is supplying these countries from this new direction. So the important role that the transit position of the Southeast European countries have been able to play is being reshaped and decreased. I very much believe that this is something that we have to focus on. New LNG terminals, access to the LNG markets, the new infrastructure that is being built is playing a fundamental role in the future development and the future stability of this region. Very quickly, there are some success stories in the 3 Seas Initiative list of projects that are important for the region, and there are some open challenges for the Southeast European part of the continent that we have to be aware of to be able to understand what next steps to do. Some success stories. The Brua line, the Bulgaria-Romania-Hungary corridor, is already operational, will be fully ready by the fall of 2020. The Polish-Slovakian interconnector will be constructed in 2022. So the Polish part of the project to reach the Świnoujście terminal has been strategically important and will continue to be more important as its further capacities will be available. The Baltic pipeline project is on its way to allow 10 BCM in 2022, hopefully. The Croatian LNG terminal finally is on its way, 2.6 BCM in 2021. Open challenges in the southern region of Europe. I think one of the most important one is clearly the Romanian offshore project that is unfortunately being hauled and I think would be very important for the region in the long term. The development of the interconnector system in the Central East European part of the continent is helping to be able to reach the potential of the Romanian offshore development, but it has to be pursued, and that underlines the importance of an important strategic presence of the United States in the region. What are the conclusions that we can see from the past few years in the Balkans? One is a very strong message that wherever there is a weakening of the European Union and the US's presence in the region, that creates a power vacuum in which we have seen in this region that will very quickly be filled in by outside actors. The United States is again becoming an indispensable counterbalance in the region to counterbalance the disruptive forces in the Balkans. The European Union has a special role, which it has been fulfilling to a large extent by supporting the strategic priority projects of the region. But the energy market liberalization and the Southeast European market integration is still challenges that we have to focus on, and the European Union will have to work on in the near future as well. It has to allow for and push for a renegotiation of the long-term natural gas contracts as well in the region. I think the list could be continued. The priority list projects that are important for infrastructure development have been identified. A lot of the progress has been accomplished, and I think this is a very important positive development. Yet where we are is a real crossroads. If the lessons of this very recent past are not understood, and if we do not go forward in implementing the rest of the missing infrastructure, we may easily see another backlash in the region.
Thank you very much, Réka. This is how you go from pipelines to geopolitics. The strategic importance of the region, I completely agree. The entire region from Romania to Greece, including Slovenia, imports from Russia about 9.9 BCM of gas, under 10 BCM of gas. For that little volume, Russia has immense political influence in quite a lot of countries, making advancing its positions even in new NATO members such as Bulgaria and Croatia and Hungary, and most of this is based on energy. So let's open to questions. I'm not going to ask questions so that we have more time for questions from the audience. Please.
Hello, I'm from Ukrainian Embassy. First of all, thank you for the wonderful presentation and thoughts upon the issue. My question is to Margarita Assenova. Yes. So earlier before you told us that the Turkish pipeline is already finished, but there's a certain part of a pipeline that is still under construction, and it goes directly in the territory of Bulgaria. How much time do you think it'll take? Doesn't really, without focusing on the company or contractor who will do that, let's say the quickest amount of time that will be needed to finish the Turkish pipeline sort of coming into the Serbian soil. Thank you.
Putin is incredibly intense in pressing the Bulgarian government and personally the Prime Minister to speed up the construction of this pipeline. It's not going to be as quickly as he wants, though, because there's certain requirements. First of all, they started the construction. They're saying that it's going to be ready by the end of the year. I don't think that's going to be the case. The Serbian part is ready, apparently, of the interconnector, but the Bulgarian part, it's longer. It goes horizontally of the entire, from almost Varna on the Black Sea all the way to the Serbian border. I think it's going to take a year and a half to build that pipeline, and then the European Commission would have to decide whether they're going to implement the gas directive to that pipeline. I think they will have to, because we have the precedent already of the European Court of Justice decision on the Opal pipeline. This is the pipeline that connects Nord Stream 1 with the network of Germany and all the way to the Czech Republic. This pipeline is called Opal. It's 36 BCM capacity. A decision by the European Court of Justice last September mandated that this using it 100% by Gazprom is in detriment to the clause of solidarity between countries in the European Union, since countries, members of the European Union, such as Poland and Estonia and Lithuania, opposed to that pipeline to be used fully by Gazprom, as it harms their national security, energy security interests. So is Greece going to object to that pipeline being fully used by Gazprom? I think Greece should object, because Greece has interest to provide infrastructure, to secure infrastructure for the LNG deliveries that are coming to, one, Revitusa, and two, Alexandroupolis, the new terminal that is still in a market study phase, but it's going to be built eventually. So you have two LNG terminals, and they would need infrastructure. The interconnector between Greece and Bulgaria is only for 3 BCM, but with compressor station can increase to 5. There are other interconnectors between the two countries that could be optimized as well. So the bottom line is, even if the pipeline is built very quickly, then the action of the European Union should limit the usage of this pipeline for one source only to 50%. Otherwise, Borisov is under immense pressure, to the extent that there are now speculations and there are reports about him being involved in money laundering, and I just wonder where all this is coming from. We will see whether it's related to pressure from Moscow, because yeah, they have the capacity to harm somebody's name. Well, Borisov is engaged in this. He's very eager to do it. He's not reluctant to do it. The opposite, that was all his idea, the Balkan Gas Hub. But also he decided that the government should take stake in the new LNG terminal in Alexandroupolis to secure sources from more gas from more sources. So if he's put in if the government is put under the right conditions by the European Union, even if the pipeline is completed, it will probably transit about 7.5 BCM of Russian gas, no more than that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Valentin Budău, Embassy of Romania. Excellent presentations and very useful information. I have two questions for Margarita. You mentioned that TurkStream 2 endpoint would be Baumgarten.
Yeah.
And that would mean that Hungary would have to basically connect to Austria to either to expand or build a new connection, which they've declined on the Brua pipeline. So I was wondering if you have more information on this. And connected to the first question, I was wondering if you have more information on the capacity bids or negotiations or whatever on the sections of TurkStream. Was there a hub reference price, or what was the mechanism? Because Bulgaria and Hungary are EU member states and Serbia is a candidate, so energy union conditions apply to all of them. Thank you.
Can we go back to Misha's presentation? There was a Commerçant graph, yeah.
Here we go.
So these are actually the booked capacities through the European Union advanced booking action that was already offered, and it was already booked, and mostly companies that are either related to Gazprom or derivative of Gazprom. You see the capacity coming, the volumes coming to Bulgaria, 15.75, and then it goes to Serbia, goes to 11. It means that some gas is used in Bulgaria, and some goes to Macedonia. And then it goes 11 to Serbia. That capacity is booked too. Then you have to Hungary, 9, and then in Slovakia, entering Slovakia, 4.3. The idea was initially to get that gas to Baumgarten. I don't know what the state of the connections is, but whatever goes to Baumgarten is going to be small.
Baumgarten is just at the end of the line.
At the end of the orange line.
Yeah, it's at the border of Slovakia and Austria.
But this is a small quantity. Probably you wouldn't need any kind of expansion. As I said at the beginning, I look at this as more of an experiment to see how it's going to go and whether they can multiply that infrastructure and bring more gas to Central Eastern Europe. The other thing is Gazprom is trying to preempt everybody else. They're trying to preempt the Southern Gas Corridor. They're trying to preempt the increased LNG deliveries to the Balkans in order to lock the market, to reserve the market for itself. And they didn't succeed with South Stream. They're trying with TurkStream. I think Russia is failing with TurkStream, to be honest. The pipeline is not delivering as much gas to Turkey as they wanted to deliver. It's only about 8 BCM at the moment. It's just very small compared to capacity. To Bulgaria, they might end up with no more than 7.5. I mean, building this expensive pipeline to deliver 15 BCM of gas to Turkey and the Balkans is, in my opinion, it's an economic and financial and strategic failure. The question is whether the European Union is going to be firm and strict with its own laws not to allow this to happen. But in order to do that, they have to be firm and strict on Nord Stream as well. Because you cannot be strict on Turkish Stream and Bulgarian Gas Hub and be lax about Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2.
My name is Glenn Howard, President of Jamestown. Mikhail, when you listen to what Margarita is saying about overcapacity by Gazprom and its strategy to build all these pipelines, where do you think Putin stands now in his strategic thinking on energy? He's seen some problems with Nord Stream, to Europeans, U.S. sanctions. So what are your just general impressions about where Putin, is he just wanting to build and just have complete excess capacity so that he can just dominate everything? What's his thinking?
The old plan was initiated in the early 2000s when the consumption, gas consumption in Europe was growing, and it coincided with the growth of gas price, which is a rare coincidence. But Putin and his administration assumed it would go forever. And the old plans of Gazprom anticipated exports of like 330 billion cubic meters by this year. Miller announced a plan in 2010. Miller announced a plan for 2020 to increase exports by 200 billion cubic meters, which results in 330 something or 340 billion by now, which is nearly twice, not twice, but significantly much higher than a real number. Basically, things went wrong with the old plan of Putin. Did not anticipate availability of new gas. First of all, the shale gas in America. Even Gazprom questioned even the Turkmenistan reserve. They insisted on running audit for these reserves and blamed Turkmenistan for inflating the numbers. But when it turned out to be true and exceeded the expectations of Turkmenistan, Gazprom just canceled everything, all relations with Turkmenistan, because originally the Kremlin, Putin wanted to buy all gas around Europe and resell it on Russian terms. The original plan was like that: buy gas from Turkmenistan, from Libya, even from Nigeria through Trans-Sakhara pipeline, leaving no gap for any other gas to make it to Europe. But as I mentioned, new gas discoveries, sharp reduction of cost of LNG production, development of LNG transportation, especially alternative energy, which took over and taken over gas and power generation in Europe. So the plants collapsed, but the construction plan remains the same, even it's growing. If you look at the whole picture of Europe,
he didn't adapt.
No, he's going
adapt to the changing market.
he's doesn't have reverse. He's capable. If he goes like a car. Yeah, just like if you have a broken car without reverse, if you make it to the dead end, narrow street with dead end, you won't make it back. That's it, period. So if you look at the whole picture in Europe, it's the consumption peaked in about 2010, and the import capacity, if you add up all LNG terminals and existing pipelines from all around Europe, exceeds the highest anticipations of gas consumption. But still, from the market standpoint, Europe doesn't need to build anything at all. Simply, it's competition is driving. Someone is still trying to sell cheaper gas, but this is not the case of Putin, because he is not selling new gas. He is selling same gas a different way, which doesn't make sense. They invest $100 billion into Nord Streams and TurkStream just to bypass, to divert same volumes to another routes. So it's total loss from market standpoint.
Gazprom has already 100 BCM of spare capacity in Europe as it is, without Nord Stream 2. With Nord Stream 2 and Turkish Stream, this capacity is going to grow to 176 BCM. So why does Russia need more capacities when it already has 100 BCM of unused, unutilized capacity? And when we started raising this question, they immediately adopted the answer. Well, but we need this capacity for peak hours when gas consumption is bigger, and we need this capacity because consumption in Europe definitely, absolutely is going to grow. All the studies that have been prepared by BP and other institutes and research institutes are showing that gas demand in Europe is not going to grow. Gas production is going to go down. That's true. But as gas production is going down, new sources of energy are coming, such as LNG. So that vacuum, that deficiency doesn't need to be met by Russian gas again. It could be met by alternative sources of energy. But the studies of BP, for example, in 2040, it's predicted that European energy consumption as a whole is going to be reduced by 11%. And the share of gas within the energy mix is going to increase only by 1%. So Europe is switching to renewable energy sources, and they're looking at gas as transitional fuel. And if Gulmira Rezaeva was here, she was supposed to come to this conference, she would tell you that the discussions in energy circles in Europe are now about alternative energy sources, about renewable energy sources, looking at gas as only as a transitional fuel, an option. One of the options on the table. Not the one that's going to necessarily replace coal, but the one that is going to be on equal par with renewables.
Willem de Vogel. Adding on to your comments, can you factor in the new pipeline from Poland to Norway and the effect it has on everything you've been discussing so far?
The Baltic pipeline is had European Union normal business relations with Russia, it wouldn't be needed at all. But unfortunately, the energy program or strategy of Russia doesn't say sell gas. It says control gas flows from east to west. And this is absolutely different from just trading relations. It assumes that, and there are many examples of that, that Russia can turn off gas flows to whenever it wishes and to whoever is not acting properly, which is judged by the Kremlin. So it is unfortunately necessary infrastructure because of this type of relations. Not alone, but combined with the expanding LNG terminal, it does. And actually, Poland can import more through the so-called virtual import scheme. They can take off gas from the flow that's going to Germany and other countries west of Poland. So they simply buy it in Germany and use it in Poland while gas is crossing. It's a normal operational procedure in Europe.
Thanks, Bob Sakuda. I was, we've been talking here about sort of the Russian piece on this. There's a new commission, and there are new plans of the commission, and as you sort of noted, it's very green, but realities are there. How do you see this new commission sort of acting in this situation? What do you can you sort of talk a little bit about the role Brussels, the role you think Brussels might play as the TurkStream comes on board, and also whatever happens with Nord Stream 2?
In my view, Brussels should use the European equivalent of Unfair Business Practices Act. They have a special directive with the same name, European Directive of Unfair Business Practices or whatever. Because this is exactly what Gazprom is doing and was doing with the Nord Stream 2. They were selling it and placing ads in all type of media, promising something that it was not supposed to deliver. Like commercials of Gazprom and Nord Stream 2 were saying about this gas replacing coal and saving like 160, 170 million tons of CO2 emissions a year. It's not true. This is not replacing anything. This 55 billion cubic meters replaces same 55 billion cubic meters that goes to the same customers, different route, through Ukraine instead of Germany. So this is exactly what is wrong, and the new commission should understand. Without the understanding that there is no new gas coming from any pipeline project of Gazprom, they would keep saying that it's gas is clean fuel replacing coal, blah, blah, blah.
Maybe Réka can add something to this.
Thank you so much. Yeah, can I insert in my pessimistic Central European approach? I don't see the European Commission confronting on strategic issues, especially not on energy. But I would, however, add that I think the strategy that they have, or the practice that we have seen over the past few years, was very interesting. After a very slow awakening, after a long period of inaction and lack of understanding of some of the developments in the energy sector, I believe they have shown a remarkable approach of regulating, using the regulatory tools and regulating a lot of the fundamental issues in a very sort of European market economic logic, which has not been unsuccessful in terms of creating a larger platform of proper gas-to-gas competition in the European Union's membership. And I think, ultimately, this is the goal, to make sure that energy is not a strategic tool, but it's a commodity. And I think this is the point that the European Commission has been following, not just with the third energy package, which at the time we criticized largely of saying, yeah, of course it's important to regulate, who gets access to a pipeline, but we don't have the necessary pipelines in Central East Europe for how to share the usage of them. But in the long term, as the European Union was focusing on supporting the strategic infrastructure projects of the region, and I think has been doing it over the past 5 years in a very consistent way. So actually, a lot of the really important infrastructure projects are being done now. I mean, a lot of money was put into this. we are getting closer to a situation in which most of the countries are going to be able to have a gas-to-gas competition. And then it's a commodity, and I think that's when sort of a large part of the discussion within the European framework is going to be different. And so I think the regulatory tool that they can use, combined with the financial investment decisions that they do and the financial commitment for these projects, is in fact a very efficient and a very effective way of going about, of creating a real energy market in the European Union framework.
Talking about real energy market, just wanted to give you a couple of numbers that I didn't put in the presentation. The price of gas in Europe per 1,000 cubic meters at the moment is about maybe $140 or below. This is what Western European countries are paying. Ukraine, which is importing gas from the European Union on the reverse, it's Russian gas, but it's re-imported to Ukraine, pays about $180 per million cubic, 1,000 cubic meters. Do you know how much Bulgaria pays? $280 per 1,000 cubic meters. This is because Russian gas is so cheap, right? So let's take off the table this myth about cheap Russian gas. It's not. It's actually the most expensive gas in Eastern Europe, because the Balkan countries are paying about 30% more for Russian gas than any other country in Western Europe, particularly the southern part of Europe. So the alternatives there are going to be so critically important, not only for energy security, but also for gas prices. And when Bulgargas is saying, okay, we're going to save about 40 million or 80 million from transit because we don't have to transit all this gas from Ukraine, it's going to come through a shorter way. Well, they have to first take care to reduce the gas prices that are exorbitant, still exorbitant. Bulgaria was paying close to $600 per 1,000 cubic meters in the past, in the 2012. So now this is still one of the highest in Europe, regardless of the small quantities. This is, it's Gazprom, but it's also spreading Russian corruption throughout the energy network, people who are involved in an energy distribution networks throughout the region.
Which goes back, I think, to pre-1990 as well, when we were in the big brotherhood of socialist countries. Those same predatory prices were used against the countries of the satellite, the markets of the satellite countries.
Strategic point of view, I was watching the support for NATO, joining NATO in Bulgaria, growing in '98. From 38% in '98, growing gradually to 70%, and eventually the country became NATO member. And now I see major political parties wanting Bulgaria to leave the European Union, to leave the NATO alliance, and the belief that Russia is friend of Bulgaria, going up to 78%, not the United States, not the European Union. Russia is the best friend of Bulgaria. So if you see this happening, there's something really wrong that is going on in the politics of the region. It's not only Bulgaria, there are other countries in the region as well.
Yeah, historically, it's not the first time Bulgaria is paying the highest price in Europe. It had happened before. And I think it was used like by the Bulgarian government as an example of friendship, of the benefits from friendship with Russia. The price on previous occasion with South Stream was up. Then, right after the signing of the South Stream agreement, it went down. So, and everybody applauded, this is the result of our friendship with Russia. Same is going to happen soon, because right now Bulgaria again is paying the highest price.
Do we have more questions? Okay, we're going to take 15 minutes break. Okay, we can take 20 minutes break. Talking, we're finishing a little earlier, ahead of time. The annual plan was met in quota, Gazprom. We don't have to sell to Gazprom Bank. I will see you at 3:15 or for our next panel, which is going to be very, very interesting. Thank you all.